I should have said no to the trip. That's what I keep telling myself now. But back then I was flattered. I was just a 24-year-old assistant, trying to prove I was more than someone who fetched coffee and updated spreadsheets. So when my boss asked if I'd join him on a weekend business trip to Chicago, I jumped at the chance. He said he needed someone to help run the logistics for a small industry conference. Nothing fancy, just a few panels, networking stuff, long days with too much caffeine and awkward small talk. But for me, it was the first time I'd ever been invited on a work trip. It felt like I was finally being taken seriously. His name was Daniel, 42, married, 2 kids. He never talked much about his personal life, but I knew the basics. His wife was a teacher. They lived in the suburbs. A real adult setup. He was the kind of guy who always looked put together, even when he was rushing. Tall, broad shoulders, quiet confidence. People listened when he spoke, including me. He wasn't cold, but he wasn't warm either. More like reserved, professional. Except sometimes, just sometimes, there'd be these moments. A compliment that lingered a second too long. A look I couldn't quite decipher. A brush of his hand on my shoulder that made my skin heat up for no reason. But I always told myself I was imagining it. So we flew out on a Friday morning. He upgraded both our tickets to business class. "We'll need to be rested," he said with a casual smile when I raised an eyebrow. I remember watching him sip his black coffee on the plane, flipping through his tablet while I pretended to read a magazine. I kept sneaking glances at him. His jawline, his hands, the way his shirt clung just slightly when he reached up for his bag. I hated that I noticed those things. Hated it even more that I cared. The hotel was nicer than I expected. Modern, high-rise, windows that looked out over the river. He had his own room, of course. And so did I. At least, that was the plan. Saturday night was when things shifted. We'd just finished the last panel of the day. The conference mixer was winding down, and Daniel was on his second whiskey. I was nursing a watered-down cocktail, trying not to look out of place. Most of the attendees were older, more successful. I felt like a kid who had snuck into an adults-only party. "You did good today," Daniel said, clinking his glass against mine. "Seriously, couldn't have pulled this off without you." "Thanks," I said, trying not to sound as proud as I felt. "You ever think about what you want next?" he asked, leaning against the bar. "In your career, I mean," I shrugged. "Honestly, I'm just trying not to mess up day to day." He chuckled. "Well, you're not. Trust me." There was a pause, a beat. Then he said, "Want to head upstairs? I've got a better bottle in my room." It didn't register right away. I think I just nodded out of habit. But once we were in the elevator, just the two of us, the silence pressing in, I felt it. That tension, that thing I'd always brushed off before, it was real, and it was here, now. When the doors opened, I followed him to his room without saying a word. He held the door open for me, let me walk in first. And that's when everything started to change. Daniel's hotel room was sleek and dimly lit, with soft golden lights spilling from a single lamp near the minibar. I stepped in slowly, the hush of carpeted floors and city sounds through the window, adding to the surreal feeling building in my chest. He moved with casual ease, slipping off his blazer and draping it over the back of a chair. "Make yourself at home," he said, already pulling a small bottle of scotch from his suitcase. Figured we deserved something better than conference booze. I gave a weak laugh and sat down on the edge of the couch. My heart was beating faster than it should have been. He poured 2 glasses and handed me one, then sat across from me. Not too far, not too close. His tie was loosened now, his sleeves rolled halfway up, and his eyes locked on mine in a way that made it hard to look anywhere else. For a while, we just talked. Or tried to. He asked about my family, I asked about his kids, but the words felt like placeholders. Like we were both filling space while something unspoken curled tighter in the silence between us. "You always this quiet?" he asked after a pause, swirling his drink. "Not always," I said, and then, before I could stop myself, "I guess you make me a little nervous." Daniel blinked once. His expression didn't change much, but something behind his eyes shifted, like he was processing that. deciding whether to acknowledge it or let it hang there. And then, quietly, he said, "You don't have to be." I swallowed. My mouth felt dry. I know! The tension was getting heavier, pressing into my skin like humidity before a storm. He stood up suddenly, crossed the room, and poured another splash into my glass. "Long day," he said, softer now. "You can crash here if you don't want to head back to your room. I've got an extra pillow and blanket." I looked up at him. "You sure?" He nodded. "It's late. No point in making things harder." I wasn't sure if he realized how that sentence sounded. Or maybe he did. Either way, I said yes. He tossed me a spare t-shirt and gestured toward the bathroom. "I'll change out here." When I came back, his shirt was off. His back turned as he pulled on a clean one. I froze for a second, caught off guard by how casually intimate the scene felt. Like this wasn't our first time sharing space like this. Like we weren't boss and assistant. He glanced over his shoulder. "Bed's yours. I'll take the couch." But when I climbed under the covers, I could feel his eyes linger for a moment, longer than they should have before he turned away. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding. I could hear him settle into the couch, hear the creak of the cushion, the soft exhale as he got comfortable. Then the room fell quiet. I don't know how long I lay awake listening. Could have been minutes, could have been an hour. But just as I started to drift off, I heard him say something, low, barely a whisper. "You still awake?" I turned my head toward the couch. Yeah, he was facing the ceiling too, hands behind his head. "Can I ask you something?" "Okay." A long pause. "Have you ever wondered?" He said finally. "Would it be like if things were different?" I felt my breath hitch. "Different? How?" He didn't answer right away, just sat there, motionless. Then he said, "If I wasn't married, if we weren't," he stopped. "Never mind." I stared at the ceiling again, pulse racing. "I think about that sometimes," I said quietly. That was the truth. I had. The silence returned, but it was a different kind of silence now. Dense, fragile. And then I heard him shift. Get up. The creak of the couch cushions, the soft padding of his bare feet on carpet. And then he was standing beside the bed. I turned my head toward him, eyes adjusting to the shadow of his figure in the dim light. He didn't move. Neither did I. "Daniel," I whispered, but I didn't know what I was going to say. He looked at me for a long time, like he was asking a question without saying a word. And when he finally reached out, just barely, fingertips brushing the side of my face, I didn't pull away. I didn't want to. His fingers stayed there, just gently against my cheek, like he was still unsure whether he was dreaming this or if he was really touching me. I stayed perfectly still. Not because I didn't want to move, but because if I did, I knew I'd fall straight into him. Daniel let out a breath, quiet and shaky. Then his hand dropped to his side. "I shouldn't," he said, almost to himself. I nodded slowly. "I know." But neither of us moved. The light from the city outside threw faint shadows on his face, his jaw tight, his expression unreadable. He looked like a man torn in half. And for a second, I saw past all the polished confidence, all the quiet control. I saw someone just as confused as I was. "I've never done this before," he said. I swallowed. "I haven't either. Not like this." There was another long beat. Then, carefully, Daniel sat down on the edge of the bed, his back to me. He ran a hand through his hair and laughed under his breath, but there was no humor in it. "This is crazy." "Yeah," I said, watching him. "But I'm not going to pretend I haven't thought about it." His head turned slightly. "You have?" "Since the second week I started," I admitted. "Probably sooner." He nodded once, like that answer made something inside him both calmer and more restless at the same time. Still facing away, he said, "You make it hard to ignore. The way you look at me. The way you always say exactly what you mean." I sat up a little. "You never said anything." "Because I'm married," he said. Because you work for me. Because I told myself nothing would ever happen. And now? I asked. Daniel looked over his shoulder, his eyes darker now. Now I'm here, sitting on your bed, hoping you tell me to stay. My breath caught in my throat. I reached forward, slowly, and touched his arm. His skin was warm, tense beneath my fingers. Stay, I said. He turned, his whole body shifting as he faced me. His expression was full of conflict, regret, desire, fear, all tangled into something real. I'm scared of what this means, he said. Me too, I whispered. But I don't want you to leave. That's when he leaned in. Not quickly, not like in movies. It was hesitant. Careful, like he was giving me a dozen chances to back out, but I didn't. I tilted my head, closed the distance, and when his lips finally touched mine, everything else just disappeared. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't desperate. It was quiet, warm, careful. Like we both knew we were stepping across a line we couldn't come back from, but we couldn't stop, even if we wanted to. His hand found the side of my neck, thumb brushing just below my ear, and I melted into him. When we finally pulled apart, our foreheads resting together, I could hear his heart pounding as hard as mine. This doesn't have to mean anything, he said, still trying to convince himself. But I just shook my head. It already does. He didn't argue. He lay down beside me, fully clothed, both of us facing the ceiling. His hand found mine between us on the blanket, fingers tentative but firm. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was anxious, but because I didn't want to miss a second of it. Of him. Of this impossible thing we'd just started. Morning crept in slowly, casting pale blue light across the room. I woke up before Daniel did, our hands still loosely tangled on top of the blanket. He was lying on his side now, breathing slow and even, his chest rising and falling, with a steadiness that made something tighten in my throat. He looked different like this. Softer, younger somehow. There was always a sharpness to him at work, a wall of quiet authority. But now, in this moment, that wall was gone, and I didn't know what that meant. I turned my head to the window, blinking against the light and trying to piece myself back together. What had we done? It had been nothing more than a kiss. No clothes came off, no lines crossed beyond that one moment. But the emotional line we stepped over, that was something else entirely. Eventually, Daniel stirred. His eyes opened slowly, adjusted to the light, and then found mine. He didn't speak right away. Hey, he said finally, voice still heavy with sleep. Hey, I echoed. We both lay there for a few seconds, the air between us thick with everything we weren't saying. Then he sat up, ran a hand through his hair, and looked around the room like he was trying to remember where he was. I need to shower, he said quietly, already standing up. I nodded. Sure. He grabbed a fresh shirt from his suitcase and walked into the bathroom without looking back. I stayed in bed, staring at the ceiling, heart twisting in ways I didn't know how to control. Part of me wanted to believe it was fine, that what happened last night was just a fluke, a moment of weakness, a private thing we could both move past. But the other part, the one that remembered the way his lips lingered on mine, the way his hand gripped mine like he didn't want to let go, that part wasn't so sure. When he came out 20 minutes later, hair still damp, he was back in his usual uniform. Crisp, composed, distant. You ready for breakfast? He asked, like we hadn't just shared the most vulnerable night of our lives. I sat up slowly. Yeah. We didn't talk about it. Not as we grabbed coffee in the hotel lobby. Not as we packed our things. Not even on the flight back home. It was like some silent agreement had been made. If we didn't speak of it, maybe it didn't happen. But it had happened, and pretending otherwise didn't make it go away. Back at the office Monday morning, Daniel was already at his desk when I walked in. He gave me a polite nod, nothing more. I returned it. Professional. Calm. But when I walked past him on my way to the back room, our eyes met. Just for a second. And in that second, everything was there. The kiss. The tension. The guilt. The want. It was all still alive, just beneath the surface. Later that afternoon, I got a Slack message from him. "Daniel, got a minute? Need help with the equipment inventory." I hesitated. My hands hovered over the keyboard before I replied. "Me. On my way." His office door was open, but he closed it as soon as I stepped in. No words yet. Just the quiet click of the latch sliding into place. I stood there, pulse thudding in my ears. Daniel leaned against the edge of his desk, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "We need to talk," he said. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, we do." He didn't speak right away. Just looked at me for a long moment, like he was still deciding whether he could trust me with whatever came next. Or maybe whether he could trust himself. Finally, Daniel said, "I'm not sure what I'm doing." I stayed quiet, letting him talk. "What happened in Chicago, it wasn't planned. I didn't bring you on that trip expecting any of that." "I know," I said softly. He nodded, like he needed to hear it out loud. "But I haven't stopped thinking about it. About you." There it was, the crack in the surface. The truth trying to climb out. "I've spent years being one kind of person," he continued. "The husband, the boss, the guy who always makes the right choice. And I thought I could keep those lines straight. And now?" I asked. He exhaled sharply. "Now I don't know where the lines are anymore." I stepped closer, slow and cautious. "It doesn't have to be anything right now, but you're not the only one confused." Daniel looked down, hands braced on the edge of his desk. "I can't afford to mess this up," he said. "Not with you. Not with work. Not with everything else." "I get it." He looked up. "Do you?" I met his eyes. "Yeah. Because I've been thinking about it too. And I'm scared too. But I'm here." We stood there in silence. Something fragile and real hanging between us. And then, unexpectedly, he laughed. Just a small, broken laugh. "God, I feel like I'm 16 again," he said, rubbing a hand over his face. "Sneaking around, feeling like I'm gonna get caught just for liking someone." I smiled, despite the weight in my chest. "You didn't do anything wrong, Daniel. We didn't." "I kissed someone who works for me." "You kissed someone who wanted you to," I corrected. "That's not nothing. But it's not coercion either." He nodded slowly. "So what now?" "That's up to you," I said. "But whatever this is, I'm not ashamed of it." Daniel didn't move, but his expression softened. "Just enough." "I haven't touched my wife in over a year," he said quietly. "I don't even know why we're still pretending." I didn't respond. That wasn't something I could fix, or even comment on. But it made the next part more honest. "I keep thinking about what it would mean to start over," he said. "What it would cost." "Some things are worth it," I said, barely above a whisper. His eyes locked on mine, and for a moment, it felt like the entire office disappeared around us. "I want to see you," he said finally. "Outside of work, just see you." I nodded. "Okay." A small, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Okay." Just then, the knock at the office door snapped us both back to reality. Daniel turned his back quickly, reaching for a file on the desk. "Come in," he called out, voice steady again. I stepped away, pretending to sort papers on the cabinet shelf as one of the finance guys stuck his head in. "Hey, just need you to approve the vendor invoice," he said, handing a form to Daniel. I didn't look up, didn't need to. I could feel Daniel's gaze brush over me as I kept my head down. Once the door closed again, he said, "Can you stay late tonight? I might need help finishing some of the inventory reports." His voice was perfectly neutral. "Sure," I replied, just as neutral. But we both knew exactly what that meant. The rest of the day dragged in that slow, heavy way, where every second felt double its usual length. We didn't speak again, not directly. A few emails, a passing glance in the hallway, a moment in the break room where our fingers almost touched as we both reached for the coffee pot, but no words. And yet, it felt like everything between us was vibrating under the surface. By the time 5 o'clock hit, the office started emptying. Laptops zipped into bags, goodbyes tossed over shoulders, elevators chimed open and shut. I stayed at my desk, watching the clock as the last few stragglers filed out. Daniel hadn't said anything else. No text, no signal. But I stayed. At 5:46, I got an email. Just 2 words. Conference room. I didn't even reply. Just stood, straightened my shirt, and walked. The conference room was dim, lit only by the low orange glow from the setting sun bleeding through the window blinds. Daniel was already inside, hands in his pockets, his jacket draped over one of the chairs. He didn't turn when I walked in. Just said close the door. I did. Then I stood there, not sure what came next. Daniel finally turned. His face was calm, composed, but his eyes told a different story. He looked tired, raw, like he hadn't slept since Chicago. I don't know what the hell I'm doing, he said again, echoing the same words from earlier. But I haven't been able to stop thinking about that night. About you. About what I felt when I kissed you. I didn't move. He took a step closer. I'm not going to pretend this is simple. It's not. It's messy and complicated, and there's no clean way through it. I swallowed. So why are we here? Because I need to see if this means what I think it does. I felt my pulse slam through my chest. And what's that? He stepped in close enough that I could smell the faintest trace of his cologne. Something earthy, understated. That this isn't about temptation, he said. It's not about some crush or heat of the moment mistake. I think about you. All the time. I think about your voice, your laugh, the way you look at me like I'm not just someone you work for. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until I exhaled. I don't want to be your mistake, I said. I'm not doing this if it's something you'll regret later. You're not my mistake, Daniel said. You might be the only thing in my life that doesn't feel like one right now. And then he closed the space between us. He didn't ask this time. He kissed me like he'd been waiting all day for this. Slow, hungry, but still careful, like he was learning how to do this and wanted to get it right. I leaned into him, letting the weight of everything else slip away. No job titles, no office walls, no guilt, just us. His hands found my waist, mine curled around the back of his neck. And for the first time, I didn't feel uncertain. I felt wanted. Chosen. When we pulled apart, we were both breathing harder, eyes locked. Daniel rested his forehead against mine. I don't know where this goes, he whispered, but I want to find out. I nodded, barely able to speak. So do I. The sound of an elevator bell in the distance reminded us the world hadn't disappeared completely. We both glanced toward the door. Not here, he said. Not yet. Okay. He stepped back, straightened his shirt. I'll text you tonight, he said, like it was something normal. Like we weren't standing in the center of a moment that might change everything. I opened the door to leave, but before I walked out, he called my name softly. I turned. Thank you, he said, and I smiled. For what? For not walking away. Daniel texted me that night, just like he said he would. Nothing dramatic, just, you free? I was. And he knew it. He picked me up in his car, a gray Audi that looked as tired as he did. We didn't say much during the drive. His hand stayed on the wheel. Mine stayed fidgeting in my lap. But the silence didn't feel awkward. It felt loaded, like both of us knew what we were about to do and just needed the stillness to brace ourselves. He didn't take me to a hotel. Or his house. Instead, he drove to the edge of the city to a small rented apartment that I guessed he kept for work. Neutral ground. A place outside his marriage. Outside both of our lives. Inside, it was sparse. Clean, but impersonal. A couch, a TV, a coffee table with no coasters or clutter. It smelled faintly of detergent and wood. Daniel hung his keys by the door and turned to face me. "No one knows about this place," he said. I looked around. "You live here?" "Sometimes," he said. "When I need space." I nodded, understanding what he meant without needing more explanation. He stepped closer. There was no teasing now. No uncertainty. Just the quiet gravity of two people choosing something, even if they didn't fully understand the cost yet. When he kissed me this time, it wasn't careful. It was slow, yes, but it was certain, like he'd made a decision. His hands held my face as he pulled me in, and everything that had been simmering between us over the past week finally rose to the surface. The rest of the night blurred in the way only unforgettable moments do. He was tender in ways I didn't expect, pausing often, asking if I was okay, if I needed anything. But there was intensity too, like he'd been holding himself back for too long and finally let go. And afterward, we didn't talk much. We just lay there, his arm draped over my waist, my face tucked into his shoulder. The city lights glowed faintly outside the window, and I listened to the sound of his breathing, steady and close. "This changes things," I said softly. He nodded. Yeah. There was no plan, no promises, no talk of leaving his wife or what would happen at work. We didn't need to script the future yet. But when he pressed a kiss into my hair and whispered, "I'm not going anywhere," I believed him. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like someone's secret. I felt seen, wanted. And whatever this was, this impossible, complicated, delicate thing, it was real. And that was enough.